Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today's a good day. I finally got my hands on the Festool TS 60 KEB track saw. If you ever fought with a circular saw trying to get a straight cut or dealing with tear out, then this thing's going to be pretty awesome for you. This will solve that. Festool actually sells all of these in their sustainer systems, which are pretty nice for stacking and storing. All their different tools come in about these same boxes and they all stack together kind of like the Milwaukee Packout does. So we'll go ahead and open it up and see what's inside. So opening up inside the box, what you're gonna have is your track saw here. Mine is slightly used. I will say I have tested it out a bit and actually used it, but for the sake of the video, we're gonna pretend like this is an unboxing. Open it up, inside your box, inside your box, you're gonna have your user's manual and information guide in there. And you'll have this attachment right here, which basically helps with tear out. You hook it up to the side of it, and it helps with tear out. I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. Basically what you're going to be using this saw for is anything from tearing down sheet goods, cutting things that are too big to cut on your table saw. And what you're going to also need with one of these is called a track. I'll show you the one that I got. So this is the Festool FS 1400. It is a 55-inch track. It'll sit right on here and basically ride along your cut. If you don't know who Festool is, they basically make some of the most top of the line equipment when it comes to woodworking. It's pretty high price point for some of these tools. And they don't usually go on sale too often. It's worth the money, but you definitely have to sell a few projects first before you're gonna be able to afford one of these. They're definitely very nice. I absolutely love mine. I couldn't buy a better track saw if I wanted to. Let's dive into some of the details and some of the things this saw can do. Unlike a circular saw, this blade isn't just sitting out waiting to cut you. You drop it down into the wood when you're ready. It's way safer, and you can also start a cut right into the middle of the board. The saw can cut up to 2 7/16 depth, which is plenty for sheet goods, countertops, and thicker lumber. At 45 degrees, you still get an 1 3/4 cut. So bevel cuts, they're no problem. Speaking of bevels, you can actually tilt this from -1 degrees all the way up to 47 degrees. This range, especially if you do a lot of edge work. In the TS 60 versus the TS 55, the TS 55 is the model just below this. That comes with a brush motor, but if you step up to the TS 60, that's actually a brushless motor. It runs smooth with speeds from 3,000 to almost 7,000 RPM. Basically it'll cut whatever you throw at it without slowing down. Now older Festool saws had a riving knife, and most of the other track saws you'll see do have a riving knife. This one doesn't. Instead, it's got something called a kickback stop, which is this little light right here. If the saw senses it's about to kick back, it slams the motor off instantly, which is a nice peace of mind when you're doing plunge cuts. Now you'll know if the kickback's on because this green light right here will turn on. Now if you want to turn it off, you can just click the button, it'll turn yellow and shut off, and vice versa. You click it again, you turn back on. That kickback feature is actually very helpful. It came in handy the other night. I was actually cutting up some maple, and right at the start of it, that maple wanted to close in like that, and instead of it throwing itself 20 feet behind me through my wall, what it actually did was just stop the blade immediately. It went back about 1/4 inch to an inch, and it stopped itself right then and there. So I actually got to test that feature, and it does work, let me tell you. So for changing the blade on this thing, you have this fast fix cap right here. You pull it up, your little hex key comes out. So you leave this up, push this down, and it'll lock into place right there. And what that does is it brings your little spindle right here. Spin it a little bit, the blade will lock into place, and you just twist it like you normally would any other saw. Pull your bolt out and pull this little piece out. From there you can pull your blade out and you can swap them in and out. Now this does come with a 42 tooth blade in it. As far as what I've ripped apart, this has worked phenomenal. They have some other options for abrasive materials, aluminum, plastics. They have different blades for all kinds of that. And then putting the blade back in, it's the same thing. Make sure you watch your arrow. This tells you what direction your blade rotates. So it's going to spin this way. So I'll slide my blade back in there, lock it into place, then I'll put my bolt right back in. One of the things I like as far as changing the blade on this thing is, you notice with a lot of circular saws, when you go change the blade, there'll be like a button on the side that you have to push and hold while you're trying to unlock it. This thing will lock itself, so when you have this in this downward position and you spin the blade just a tad, it'll lock itself, so you don't have to hold any buttons while you're trying to unscrew your saw blade. And then from there, you just put your fast cap back down and it'll release. So this right here is going to be your little sight window. Now you slide this down and this helps with tear out. As far as dust collection goes, this does have an angled port that you can rotate in kind of whichever 15-degree angle direction you want it to go into. Now with these track saws, one of the benefits you can do is plunge cuts. So if I need to cut basically a box right here in the middle of this, what you're able to do is get your saw lined up and you have these two markers right here and right here. And what those do is they'll show you where your blade actually enters into the thing that you're cutting. So it'll show you your starting point and your stopping point right there. Now with the plunge cut feature, you're able to set your depth gauge just by pinching this thing right here. And you have two lines right here and they basically show you your millimeters and inches marker. I'll set this at 1 inch. And then when I go to do my cut, you push up on this button right here and it'll drop down 1 inch into your material. And if you're being real particular about your cuts and you need it to be a specific depth, what you have right here is a little micro adjuster, and that allows you to get those tiny little adjustments right there so you can get your cuts to an absolute perfect depth. Your bevel cuts, right? So you loosen up this screw right here. On the bottom of it, you're gonna see a little dial right there that shows you from 0 all the way to 45 degrees. So when you loosen this screw up, you can just twist your blade out like this, and you can lock it in. Now I'm at 45 degrees, so when I go to do my cut, 45. Now this Festool actually has a -1 degree cut feature as well, which is this little plate right here. What you do is you push it forward, and you can slide back just like that, and now you'll be cutting at a -1 degree angle. On the side of this does have a variable speed adjuster. It allows you to adjust speed to suit your material. So you can go slower for plastics and hardwoods to avoid burning, or you can go faster for softwoods. But enough of that, let's go in and let's actually do our first cut with this. Before you go to make your first cut, what you might notice is your saw will tilt side to side along this rail. Obviously you don't want that, but what these have is a little micro adjuster down here, and you twist it to tighten it. Now you don't want to go too tight with those because you'll just move your whole piece and not the saw. So then you'll check, see if you have any wobble. I don't have any more wobble at this point. So now I know I'm good to go ahead and make my first cut. So you'll commonly see a lot of people using these with a piece of this insulation underneath. And what that does is kind of allows you to cut like an 1/8 inch below your material. So you make sure you're cutting all the way through, but you're not cutting into the tabletop that you're actually working on below it. So this is just an old piece of insulation I had found in the barn up here. And you can tell all these cuts are here. I've used it a bunch now. So what you'll do is you'll line your track up with, what I always do is I clamp. You guys might do this differently, and if you do, let me know if you have a better way of doing this. What I always done is I actually wrote the directions on here so I knew what direction I was cutting in every time. And I would always clamp my rail to the piece of material that I'm keeping. So if I'm cutting this chunk off right here and keeping this side, then I'll clamp my track to that piece of material. Now Festool does sell their own T-track clamps. If you've looked at them, they're rather pricey. You can kind of get away with some of these off-brand ones. And I just have these Wen track clamps. And basically what they do is they'll slide into this groove right here. So you put your clamp through there, and now you can clamp your material down and hold your track in place. These do have some nice strips underneath that actually hold your track in place pretty well, so you don't always need your clamp, especially if you don't have to be super precise about something. You just want to rip it down. You don't necessarily have to clamp it. When you first get this track out of the box, it's going to have a little plastic lining that sticks out about 1/4 inch past the rail right here. That little plastic piece kind of allows you to make sure you're perfectly flush with your system. So it'll stick out about 1/4 inch past. You put your track up, you put your saw up, and you actually run your first cut, set your depth at like 1/4 inch depth, and then you can plunge down and run your cut all the way through. And what that's going to allow you to do is cut off the excess of that plastic piece that's on there, and that's going to show you exactly where your blade's running. What I've done thus far, and this is where you guys might need to help me out at, let me know if you have a better way of clamping this piece down and aligning things up. What I've noticed is if I line my tape up to it and I want to cut this thing, let's call it 9 1/4. So I'll line up 9 1/4 right here. I'll go to the other side of the material. Now that I know I'm at 9 1/4, I will clamp this down if I need to. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm not super worried about doing that. But the stuff I'm cutting right now is 3/4 thick. So we're gonna wanna go about 7/8 with our depth right here. So now I'm at 7/8. You're gonna push up on your button right here and pull your trigger. Actually, you're gonna plug your saw in first. So you go up, pull your trigger. And that's how you make your first cut. I haven't hooked up any of my dust collection to this saw yet. There's a few ways I could do it. I just haven't done it yet. I've just been sweeping it up. I'm sure eventually I'll get it set up to where I can do that. But as of right now, I just brush the sawdust off to the side and vacuum it up later. So I know a lot of you guys are gonna ask, why not just use a circular saw? And that's very well possible. You can use a circular saw, especially if you're just a beginner. The circular saw works fine. I've used one for years. I've just gotten to the point where I can start to afford some of these tools, and my quality needs to be a little bit higher for some of the products that I am delivering. With a circular saw, you're spending a lot of time freehanding or messing around trying to clamp down a straight edge that's not always straight, and you're gonna get a lot of jagged cuts doing that. Not to mention the tear out that you get when it comes to using a circular saw. So that's the Festool TS60 KEB, unboxed, explained, and tested. And honestly, if you do any kind of woodworking where clean cuts matter, this thing is an absolute beast when it comes to that. I also want to give a huge shout out to Festool for making this video possible. They definitely helped me out big time here, especially with the project that I was working on. I kind of let them know, where I was at, what was going on with the project that I was doing, and they were nice enough to help me out with all of this and allow me to make this video here for you guys today. So stick around, maybe we'll be able to do some more videos with them and try out some of their other tools. So I really appreciate you guys watching, and check back in for the next video.